Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast, brought to you in partnership with FootJoy. Great episode coming up today, guys. We've got a Course Diaries episode with Zac Blair from our recent visit, which kind of marks the start of our, don't know whether you call it a series, from our travels in America, but it's a Course Diaries episode from the Tree Farm, a new course built out in Aiken. Now, for those of you familiar with Zac's story, this podcast will need absolutely no introduction. And for those of you who aren't, Zac's story began with this course many years ago with the development of the Buck Club. And there's been a desire and an ambition to build his own golf course for a number of years. We had Zac on the pod, I think, back in October 2021. And he had just come back from a trip to England, a bit of an inspiration trip ahead of having secured a sandy piece of land in Aiken, South Carolina. Well, when we went out in January, we had the pleasure of playing at the Tree Farm, had an absolutely great time. The course is designed by Tom Doak and Kye Goalby, and Zac's been very much a part of it coming to life. So we hope you enjoy the podcast and the rest of the America series.
Watch this.
So what I was hoping to do really on this pod, if it's okay with you, Zac, is basically do a bit of a course diary. So just really kind of, I think you came on the podcast just over 2 years ago now. So October 21, when you'd done your trip to England, you'd lost your passport before you flew, all of that sort of good stuff. And at the time you'd bought 500 acres of sand in Aiken, and that was pretty much it. And you know, talking about the construction, following it along, and then getting to see that a few weeks ago with Ryan and Tom and go out and play, I was like, yeah, wow, this is really cool. I thought it'd be great to get you back on the podcast and hear about the journey, I guess, and what's next.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, sounds good.
So, I mean, I guess the big question is, before we dive into any of this, how'd you play the Thai spinner?
Honestly, I think it just takes a ton of, trial and error, basically trying to figure out, how to, set the club and like get it that steep and everything. But yeah, it's been a long time, screwing around on the chipping green for sure.
So we touched on it just before we hit the record, but you've got quite a big year ahead, right? So you had was it the T2 at the Travelers that gave you like quite a big boost in starts, and you've got quite a big year ahead now, fit, ready to go, hopefully a busy season playing. So you've got quite a lot to juggle here, right?
Yeah. It was, coming off that major medical and, obviously that finish at Traveler was kind of the one that, put me in a really good position. And, so yeah, kind of full status this year. It's a little bit different now that they have those elevated events, and they've kind of changed them. And now they're like 70 and 80 man fields instead of last year. They were the, regular 132 to 156 type fields. So a lot of still kind of waiting and seeing on some of those events. But other than that, it's nice to be able to pick my schedule and, know where I'm going to be able to get in and play.
Yeah. And you've got a lot going on as well with the Tree Farm, I can imagine. So, whilst, I should say, whilst the course is complete, I sense that the journey is far from finished. You've got loads more to do, right?
Yeah, it's just, the course is still pretty immature on the edges. It's going to be a couple year process, I think, to really get those to kind of flourish and be what we want them to be long term. And then obviously the cabins and the clubhouse and the whole built environment is just kind of either starting or getting close to being finished on some of the cabins. So those will be done sometime this summer, and gearing up to open, kind of grand open this fall for that whole kind of stay and play experience, which a lot going on, but at the same time you can kind of see the finish line, which has been pretty cool.
Where is there like a date? Have you got something in your head that you're working to? Or are you thinking, do you know what? By then I want to have everything built. I want to have everything running, and I want to be kind of not finished with it, because that's wrong, but you get what I mean, right? Where you can sort of go, right, there's no major capital projects now going on.
Yeah, the fall, really. Yeah. So I don't know if we have a real kind of open date. We usually kind of choose that sometime in the summer, but that's really what I've kind of had my eyes on is getting the golf course again, like you said, not it's never going to be really like finished, until it's finished, I guess, and that'll take a couple of years, I think, like I said, on the edges to really get those where we want them, but the rest of it is really just want the kind of operation and everything figured out, and the cabins and the clubhouse to be opened up this fall.
So we I mean, when we played it a couple of weeks ago, the colors and everything are beautiful, aren't they, this time of year? So we had everything's dormant, and that was the same everywhere. Actually, I kind of get the sense that it's gone out of fashion to overseed now in the off season. Everyone likes the dormant look, but I mean, the colors are beautiful. Everything's looking great on the course. You've obviously got work going on with the clubhouse and everything. We just had an absolute blast. And if I'm honest, when I turned up to the course, I didn't really know what to expect. I'd obviously seen a few pictures, and I didn't really know what to expect. To somebody who's maybe not been to the tree farm before, how would you explain the golf course in the most simplest way possible in terms of how it plays, how it feels?
Fun is kind of the first thing that comes to my mind. I mean, that was the whole the objective and the goal with building it was to build something that people kind of really enjoyed and wanted to kind of tee it up again once they got done with 18. But it's a big golf course in terms of kind of the width, and kind of sprawls all over the place. It's not super long by any means, but it kind of has, a handful of long par fours and par threes that'll kind of punch you in the face, but it's got plenty of short, fun holes that, you can either drive or get close to the green, and, a lot of birdie opportunities. So it's got a lot of flexibility in kind of how it plays. And it's got a lot of variance, which to me is what really kind of sets it apart from a lot of places. Is it can play very different from day to day and round to round. And there's a lot of big swings in terms of bogeys and doubles and birdies and eagles, and it can kind of go all over the place.
Yeah, and I don't know if this was intentional, but I almost felt like those sort of high variance holes, the ones where there's birdie opportunity but there's jeopardy if you get it wrong, I sense that they kind of almost picked up more towards the end of the round, and maybe some of the more, it sounds like a bad comment to say, like, more of the sort of regulation, straightforward pars, they felt like they were sort of, it built up to that in the front nine. So the front nine felt like it was more sort of slightly more regulation golf. And then when you cross that little road where you come into the clubhouse and you go out down 13, it really starts to smack you in the mouth then, where you get the sort of, maybe some of the more provocative green sites. It feels like there's a bit more jeopardy to being on the wrong side of the hole, and it all sort of built up to that, which I thought was quite neat. Was that a sort of a conscious decision when you were sort of looking at this and building the course?
Not really. It just kind of turned out that way, and the round certainly crescendos at the end, and it does build up, and you hear a lot of people talk about the finish from 13 through 18, which is cool. And again, with the goal of being, hey, want to get people right back on one tee when you get done with 18. There's kind of no better finish than what's out there. So it's cool to hear people kind of see that and feel that, and it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, sure. So when we spoke last, you basically got Tom Doak to come on board and help in terms of the routing. Kye Goalby's done a lot of the work and been working with you in terms of the construction. Is that right? So, I guess how's that sort of whole creative process work? Try and bring that. I'd be curious to hear how that works, because you must have in the room there sort of three minds who have very different views of the world, trying to build something in the, albeit trying to build something fun, but maybe have a completely different interpretation of what that should look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, Tom was hired just to do the routing. Kind of figured there's nobody better at that in the whole world, so might as well, let him kind of take that and run. So he did the routing and then came down and we walked it, and we made a few tweaks to it here and there with Tom, on some of those site visits. So it changed a little bit from, his kind of first final version that he brought down and we staked out and, explored that. And then after that, he kind of handed the keys over to Kye to build it. So there wasn't a ton of, discussions and, asking Tom kind of what he thought on a bunch of stuff. He did come down maybe a couple more days, to look at some of the progress once we had a handful of the greens done and, some of the stuff roughed in, just to get his eyes on it and to get his insight. Again, obviously one of the best there is out there. So we just, felt like can't hurt to get some more eyes on it. But really it was more Kye and me, building the golf course at that point. So, Kye, after maybe a handful of days of shaping, I felt really comfortable that Kye had a pretty good handle on what I was trying to accomplish with the golf course. And, he's been around some of the best projects in the world, new and old, and seen all the greatest golf courses anywhere. So I felt very comfortable that he would be able to kind of execute my vision on what we wanted, and he did a really good job. And some of the other guys that helped out, like Matt Smallwood and Eamon Sullivan, and Ben Warren was there for a brief little period, but that was kind of the bulk of the crew that kind of did everything. So
yeah, nice. So when you've got that routing plan down, you've then got to, obviously you've got to work with whatever Mother Nature gives you and stuff, but how long does that take to sort of move the earth around and push everything around to the point where you're like, yeah, I've got this set? I've heard the term recently explained to me, building it in the field versus having very specific kind of measurements as to where you want the grades and how you're almost within sort of a few mil of where you want the sort of line to the earth. To what extent are you sort of going out, walking the course and then saying, actually, we want to redo this. We want to maybe get a bit more severe with this slope on the back of the green or whatever that is. How long does all that process take? Hey guys, Sam here. Now, most of you will know I'm a long-time admirer of the legendary sticky spirit that is Kimmel, not least of all for its performance improvement qualities after lunch on a long day's golfing. So, our friends over at Versed, spelt VRSD, have come up with their own British concoction, beautifully presented, and for listeners of this podcast, it comes with a 25% discount code. So whilst I drink a lot of this at golf clubs, it's perfect to have at home for when you've got friends over, and let's face it, you never know when a bottle of Kimmel might come in handy. It's exceptionally well made, beautifully balanced, and a clean, refreshing and modern take on this timeless spirit. Customers must be over 18 to order, to purchase and to receive 25% off your order. Head to getvrsd.co.uk and use the code CookieJar, that's all one word, CookieJar, at checkout. What are you waiting for?
Yeah, it really kind of depends. Hole to hole, green to green, feature to feature. Everything out there was kind of done in the field. There was no drawing anything and, this is what we want to do here. It was really kind of, hey, let's go see what's out there and, show me what you got, and we'll kind of talk about it and figure out if that's the right direction. And that was something that was, I had never done this before. So I kind of thought, oh yeah, we're going to draw all these things out. And like, this is exactly how we're going to do the green and, going to show you where all the little slopes are and stuff. And Kye was kind of like, no. Like that's not how we that's not the best way, to get the best out of the land. Sure, people do that, and that's kind of a whole different side of golf course architecture that I'm sure plenty of people do, but that wasn't kind of the process that we went with at the tree farm. And I think it allowed Kye and the rest of his crew to be creative and do things that they thought would work and do things that they thought would work well with the land, because again, that was kind of one of the big goals with it was kind of just to do as little as possible in a lot of the areas and just let the land, really be the star, and not try and force a bunch of stuff and build a bunch of stuff just to build it. And yeah, he did a really cool job with all the green sites, I thought, and it just turned out like really cool.
It must be tough though, because this is, I mean, I obviously never built a golf course, but this is your first golf course, right? So I can imagine the temptation to not get, like, if it was me, I'd get totally carried away. Like, I'll be totally honest. It'd be hard not to get carried away on trying to be, almost too creative with what you're building, or trying to, almost put too much stuff in there, right? I think a lot of people say, a lot of the great architects, it becomes more minimalist over time. And I don't know whether that's true or not, but I feel like at the tree farm, it's pretty sparing in terms of the use of bunkering. I think, like I said, I think that's, when we're talking about this, you're saying, I think the green sites are actually really natural and quite nuanced. There's not like crazy slopes. It's all quite pared back in quite a natural way. I'd imagine that must be almost impossible. Like you almost want to go crazy on it the first time, don't you?
I think again, kind of a lot of the credit on that to Kye. He was kind of like, hey, look, everyone for the last 20 years is like in this arms race to do all this flashy kind of, old Mackenzie bunkering that, has these huge flashed up lips with, all the crazy shapes going on. He's like, I think it might be cool to kind of go the opposite direction and just do something just really, toned down. And there was this quote from Bobby Jones in one of his books talking about Augusta that it was like, there's a dearth of bunkers. And that was something that always kind of like stuck with me, was like, oh, that's like, I didn't even know what that word meant, and I was like, I'm just like reading this paragraph going like, man, that's cool. So that stuck with me, throughout the whole project, was like this dearth of bunkers. So we really tried to do as few as possible. And, a bunch of them kind of got broken up into like some smaller bunkers, like on 7 at one time. It was really just like 2 or 3 bunkers, but then they got broken up into like these little pods. So there's more than there really is out there. Like the number is bigger than there really kind of is, if that makes any sense. But yeah, Kye was always into this kind of like, toned down, pared back, not getting caught up in this like arms race of building all this crazy stuff. And that was just kind of a decision that we ran with. And I think it's something that you kind of have to, hear and see and play to really kind of understand. I think it's just like a very sophisticated look that will, just be really cool forever. It's never really going to go out of style. And I think it takes a lot of rounds and visits to really, really appreciate all of the stuff that's out there. And it might not hit you kind of right in the face like a lot of newer places do with some of that crazy flashy stuff going on. But, like the green sites, I think every one of them, but 17 and 1, you could, and 4, I guess the 3 par 3s or the 4 par 3s, every other hole, you could literally just basically putt it from the tee to the green and just keep it on the ground the whole time. There's not a ton of forced carries out there if you don't want to do it, but there's also a bunch of holes where, you can gain some advantage if you want to take on some of those carries or some of the hazards. And that was another thing that I just thought, from what I've seen in golf, I've played with a lot of different levels of players, and those recoveries around the greens are some of the best things in golf. And when you make them just so challenging that even the highest level of players like can't ever do it, like how do you ever expect somebody that's not really good to do it? And again, those are some of the funnest shots in golf. So I thought he did a really good job with the greens and the green sites. And a lot of them are kind of on the ground, but give you some options to recover well. And then if you noticed it, like 8 and 12 are really kind of the 2 flattest spots on the property. And I think those are kind of the probably the two most turned up greens just in terms of what's going on, kind of
Yeah,
like
8 you
internal
want to miss
contour
short, don't
wise.
you? 8 you've got to miss short. Like,
Yeah. It's eight, when the pins are right in the kind of, low bowly type area, you can get away with missing right and long sometimes because you can use some of the slopes. But I mean, you just cannot miss left, you're dead. And then even 12, there's some spots, to certain pins that you can really use some of that internal contouring to kind of bring balls back and feed balls to some of the spots. But, then there's some spots that you just can't miss. Unless you're Drew King and, can chip in from behind the green to the back pin, which was insane.
well, I mean, look, you've sort of teed me up a bit here, Zach, and I do quite like getting my own golf into this podcast whenever possible. But I missed 12 right into the pine straw, and the pin was
Okay.
cut right tight on the right edge of the green, just up on that ledge that cuts across the green.
Yeah.
So he
Yeah.
was like, I think Ryan was caddying with us, Ryan, presumably, and he was like,
Yeah.
you are dead there. I must. I
Yeah.
think. I mean, I've got no short game either. I've hit probably the best shot off that pine straw in my life to about 4 feet. He lost his mind. But there are so many. I think there's so many of those spots where you find yourself off the green, and you've got to hope. And it does challenge your creativity, but you're not going to be there all day either. You're not going to be just having no fun, like you say. I think Plates has always had this saying that an impossible shot from a great lie is far more enjoyable than an easy shot from a tough lie. And I think that gives you it in spades. But it's interesting, yeah, talking about, like you say, some of the greens like that. And I think it's kind of deceptive when you look at greens, certainly like 8, which look like an incredibly flat green from the distance. And then you get up on it and you're like, oh, yeah, wow, actually, that's really clever how you've used quite flat ground there to make something really interesting, even though I don't think there's an actual greenside bunker into 8, is there? There's one short right, but it's sort of staged back a little bit. It's quite an exposed green. So no, I loved it. In terms of, have you tried to borrow any features? I mean, when we did that podcast in October 21, I think you said that Kye said, "Oh, the land has real St George's Hills vibes." Like, that he felt like there was some similarities to the site. Having been, I can see it's very rolling in that sense. In terms of the features you've put in, have you tried to, obviously the Redan hole is a bit of a given, but are there other sort of features that you've tried to maybe bring another twist in? I think Ryan might have said to us about the 4th hole feeling like that's. I've not been to Pine Valley, but kind of there's shades of that hole in what you're going for there.
Yeah. Kye was a little against, really going like any sort of template route.
Yeah.
We, like you mentioned, we got the Redan. That was more kind of, that was more kind of Tom in the kind of field notes being like, hey, this hole sets up perfect for this, if you want to do that. So we ended up, building the Redan just because it was kind of sitting there. And then the punch bowl on the next hole was another one that was just, that was already just sitting there. And then 4, yeah, it's modeled kind of after 5 at Pine Valley. Again, just, that was something I had mentioned to Tom that I really liked that hole and thought it was such a unique par 3. And, he kind of said, well, hey, you could, build your own version right here if you wanted. It's like kind of all the same dimensions and, length and how uphill it is and everything like that. But we tried not to get super carried away, but there are definitely like shades of holes that we like kind of all over the place sprinkled in. 18 kind of evolved into what it is. I was pretty vocal with Tom doing the routing that, I loved 18 at North Berwick and how short it was and how everybody felt like, they got a chance to knock it on and make a 2 to end the round. And that hole, the green kind of evolved. I mentioned to Kye the 16th hole at Augusta National and how it, has that little top shelf to where not every single ball kind of gets down to the left or, when the pin's up on the top shelf, sometimes you miss it and it comes all the way back down the hill. Because originally it was just kind of like this single plane kind of really sloped back to front and kind of everything would get down. So, there's stuff like that that's just sprinkled in, but I think that's pretty normal with any place and finding similarities with, other great holes across the world.
I think we've evolved into long finishing holes, and you look at some of the really good ancient links. Machrihanish, another banging short par four finisher. North Berwick, Old Course. There's so many of them. Yeah, I mean it's a real shorty, the 18th at Tree Farm, isn't it? It's a real, but there's jeopardy there as well. This isn't just hit it up there and putt from off the green. Like, you can get yourself into a world of trouble, as I found out. So yeah, tell me about the Maryland thing. So when we were out at a hoopy, Colin pulls these wonderful scorecards together. The Maryland Timber Company scorecard.
Yeah, that was the original name.
That was the original name of the site, was it?
Well, that was the name that I wanted to name the golf course. We bought the property, and we bought it from the Maryland Brick Company, or it's Maryland Holdings, or something with Maryland. And it was this old company in Aiken, more Augusta, I guess. That owned a bunch of property and made bricks and tile and stuff like that. So I always, the Rock Creek Cattle Company was always a golf course name that I thought was just so wild and unique, and just just like so absurd. But I mean, it was obviously the Rock Creek Cattle. That was what it was. Yeah. So I always loved that name, and when we bought the property from them, I was like, man, this would be such an absurd name that I think it would be pretty cool. And it eventually just, some friends ended up just calling it like the Tree Farm when we were out there, and then everybody just started calling it that. So we ended up just going with that. But yeah, it was a cool, we still have an event called the Maryland Timber Cup, which is a cool way to kind of honor the original name. But yeah, it's wild.
You touched on it with the club. So, the observation would be the number of private developments in the US has gone like crazy. There's tons, aren't there?
Yeah.
All of a sudden. Did I spot you at one yesterday? I hadn't even heard of Ladera. Is that right?
Yeah. It's kind of a new Gil Hans spot out.
The stuff going on in Texas. Obviously, Old Barnwell's, open, is open for preview play at a similar time. And again, there's a lot of private developments, I suppose, is what I'm driving at. And I suppose, how hard is it to sort of create differentiation beyond 18 or 36 holes of golf? I suppose so much of this comes down to the culture, right? And trying to build something a bit unique, really. It must be, because it does. I mean, maybe that's an unfair take, but it does feel like there's all of a sudden so many different private developments.
Yeah. I think I've always felt like I'm a big reason a lot of the people have joined the Tree Farm. Whether they're kind of people that have supported me, or people that like what we're trying to do or like the vision. But I've always just said, look, we're just trying to build a cool place for people that love golf. Kind of tried to keep it as simple as possible, and the whole club culture and atmosphere, and what we're trying to do, and club events, and just the whole experience that we're trying to offer, I think is unique and awesome and really cool, and people enjoy themselves while they're on the site, and want to come back again for another crack at it. So that's kind of what the Tree Farm's all about, and I think that's why so many people have hopped on board and wanted to be involved.
Yeah. Is it hard to sort of now think about how you match the clubhouse and all the sort of infrastructure and around it? Because I'm guessing if in a world of like the dark ages of the 80s or whatever, this would be done in the other order, wouldn't it? You build the real estate, you build the clubhouse, you get all the nice shiny things done, and then somebody sticks the golf course in. This is there was actually similar at Old Barnwell. Cabin culture is quite cool, actually. Like I love the whole cabin culture you've got there with what's on site at the moment, but you're going to move to full buildings. How hard is it to try and think about how they all now integrate and work with the golf course? I mean, Ryan knows. By the time we release this, we'll have done a tour pod with Ryan. Ryan is completely down a vortex of Clubhouse and all that sort of stuff at the Addington.
Yeah.
Like the guy's like Rain Man with it, and he's mental. He's nuts with it, isn't he? And he's like sort of thinks about it to such a level of detail. It's insane. Are you kind of right in the weeds on all that sort of stuff and how that's going to work?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a full other, you know, fully separated from golf, but also kind of perfectly integrated in all of it. So my really good friend Alex War, who's the architect on the project, is a huge golfer. He's the person that's been involved with me on this kind of whole journey probably definitely longer than anyone. And he just cares so much about everything. He's kind of like me on the golf side of it, and has kind of got me to think in that way on the building side of it. So he was it was really cool to kind of hear him talk, and want to talk to Tom and want to talk to Kye about building sightings and like how they should interact with the golf, because it's super important. And a big thing for me was getting the clubhouse kind of as close to golf as possible, and with such a unique start and unique finish, having the drivable par 4 to finish and having the par 3 to start, and getting the clubhouse located and sited close enough to kind of see that stuff. The entertainment factor and the theater of the golf was always a big thing. So he's been really cool to just discuss that all with, and I know that he cares so much about it that he'll definitely get it right.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it? I think the way you've got that 18th coming up with that, you've got that embankment, haven't you, at the back? It's just perfect for sitting there with beers, watching people come in down 18. Like it's almost
Yeah,
like it's built-in theater.
yeah, exactly. And I mean the siting of the clubhouse is so site specific. And that's something Alex talks about a lot. Like you'll never ever see a clubhouse built like the Tree Farms clubhouse, because it would only be built on that site. For what we're trying to do. So we thought that was super unique, and it'll add another level to the experience, and that's kind of what we're all about. Is that total experience.
Yeah, nice. Any sort of massive learns? I mean, is anything like if you had your time again, is there anything because I suppose you see it for everything, having been involved from minute one of building that golf course. So you must look at it for all its and think, oh God, we made a mess of that, or oh, I wish I'd have done that
Yeah.
differently.
I mean, so much of it. I'm very happy with where it is and where it's going to be, but at the same time, I feel like, if I could rewind the tape with everything we've done and start back
Mm.
over, it could be even better in a lot of the areas. Like two specific examples, one on the golf course, one on the building side, would be, the whole clearing process was like super destructive, obviously. Clearing a forest, right?
Yeah.
You're in there with the huge tiger cats taking down these trees, and they're just dragging them all over the place. And all the understory and all the vegetation around the site, all the stuff that's undisturbed is pretty cool and unique and different. And we basically just absolutely nuked everything, to get the trees out. And so I feel like, you could have done a lot better job with some of that stuff if you would have
Mm.
just paid attention and been more careful. And the just all the civil engineering and all the stuff that you would never ever think of is just so wild. And knowing what I know now, I feel like you could do it a lot better. But then on the building side of it, I went to Brambles, which is this new golf development golf course out in California a couple of years ago, and the course is like roughed in and shaped, and I think they were grassing a little bit of it at that time. But I mean, this was a couple of years, at least 2 years ago. But they already had the first piece of the clubhouse kind of built and done. And it was so cool to be able to go there and meet the guy and sit in the clubhouse and see all the renderings of what the rest of it was going to be, but also see the construction. And so if we could have had the clubhouse piece that's kind of under construction right now, built like 2 years ago and had people come in and sit on the back porch and, hey, this is where the first tee is, and that's the first green, and here's 18 coming down here, and that's the green site. I think it would have been the coolest place to hang out during construction and just watch the whole thing. So those are two things that I always kind of think about, and maybe on the next one, but again, very happy with where we're at.
I suppose it's hard with the tree clearance though, isn't it? Because I'm guessing
For
that
sure.
when you go in there, it was so dense that it's like I can't see what I'm working with. It must be so dense that you sort of you've got to clear it out just to see what you're dealing with to a certain extent. I know you've got topo maps or whatever, but it's never quite the same, I'd imagine.
Yeah, it's just I would say more so on like it's fine to clear them all. You obviously have to build the golf, but it was more like the next phase after you cut the trees down. They drag the trees, over to the loading deck and get them all like stripped and cleared, so that you got these big machines kind of just dragging them all over. And then you go in there and you turn up the ground and you kind of stump and grub the whole place. And that's the part that was just like, we just completely nuked the 200 acres of golf course, right? That we didn't leave any natural vegetation like inside of golf. And that's an area where it's like the area in front of one tee all the way to one green, or the area in front of 4 tee all the way to 4 green, or the area in front of 3 tee all the way to 3 fairway. It's like you could have left all those areas, all the area around 9 green side or the hillside right of 4, or just like, all the area, the Badlands on 13. Like you could have just left all the native vegetation in those areas instead of them just completely being obliterated. And they'll, you can reestablish them. And that's kind of what I was saying earlier in the pod is, those are going to take a couple of years to come back and flourish. And it'll be kind of an evolution over time to really get back where they were. Cause I mean, that's just like undisturbed stuff for, 50, 60, 70 years. So it'll all come back and be fine, but just takes time.
Yeah, for sure. We had a guest on the pod pretty recently, and he's like sort of working on construction stuff, and he's involved up at Cabot working on the new Doak course there. And when we sort of touched on the pod, and then he gave us a proper run through off air, which is a shame we didn't capture it. But he was trying to give me a scale of just the amount of engineering work that's going on behind the scenes, just the whole thing with how you move water around, how you move earth in an efficient means. And he was like, you've got no idea how much money you can blow just by moving dirt around in an inefficient ways. Like you've got no idea what damage that can do to a course construction budget. And it's like, it's really hard to have all that stuff humming so that, you're not wasting fuel, driving stuff, moving earth to one side that you don't need to, and kind of all of that good stuff really. So, I mean, what in terms of the plans then for Tree Farm, because there'll be a lot of people in Britain who will no doubt be extremely keen to sort of follow it. Dare I say, if they're in the US, play it. It's a fully private model, correct? But there's going to be a little bit of public play.
Yeah, Masters Week, we kind of plan to, turn it loose that week and,
wow.
Figure out a way to, take advantage of the busiest golf tournament, in the world that happens, 30 minutes down the road. And, I've always been super high on the Sand Hills and Terry Eady kind of write a letter and, come play at one time. It's like we built the place for people to see. And, we obviously, it's a fine line, making sure that you're kind of taking care of the membership who's paid a lot of money to be a member. But at the same time, you never know when that leads to a great person seeing the place. And never, you never know when it leads to, somebody having the best time of their life, or, it's just something that is always really cool. So we definitely want to figure out kind of the right way, for something like that. And then I've also always been a fan of, like the St. Andrews, like ballot type thing where, I wouldn't be opposed to kind of doing something like that, like once a month or something, again, it's a fine line of trying to figure out exactly how that works. And, does that mean you can never do it again? Or does that mean, I don't know all the particulars about how we could make it work, but definitely want to figure out a way, because I know that not everyone can, stroke a check to be a member, and it doesn't make sense for, people all across the world, but, they might want to see it one time in their life or something like that. So there's certain ways to figure it out. And again, my big thing is, we built the place for people to see it. So
maybe keep the St Andrews sort of sleep outside the front door until 5 a.m. Maybe keep that one on that might impinge on member experience, I suspect, if you've got guys turning up with sleeping bags.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Good stuff. And are you so bruised from this now, Zach, where you're thinking we're not doing this again? Or is that going to take a few years before you think, go on, we might have another go now?
I mean, I would love to do something in Utah. Obviously the Buck Club is something that I don't think it's going to be private. I would like it to be more on the public kind of Sweetens Cove, side of things, where anyone, anytime could come check it out. But I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to building something in Utah on the private side either. Maybe down the road if you found the right site or something like that. But it is a lot of work. I think we bought this property on my birthday in August 2020. This year it'll be 4 years. So it'll be 4 years basically to the day, from the time we actually purchased the property till the doors of, sleeping 52 people on site are kind of up and running, which, I don't know if that's fast or slow, or, we could have probably got there a year quicker if things would have matched up perfectly, or but it is a lot of work.
It's a heap of effort. Yeah. They work on anything for 4 years. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's something, I mean, you could ask my wife, I do it every day, all day, basically, so when I'm home, it's, talking to people and, cause I'm kind of the main person that kind of deals with everything from golf to the buildings, to the membership, to inviting new people, to, coordinating events with our, golf staff. And obviously we have people like Eric Dietz, our general manager, and, Drew King, kind of head of the golf side of stuff. And we have a, great superintendent, Nick Roth, who takes care of the golf course. So I'm not doing the day-to-day little things on site. But I'm kind of got my fingers in all the big picture stuff that, makes the whole place, get to where it's going.
It must be hard.
So yeah,
you're playing with guys that are playing a full-time schedule where that is the only thing they're doing, right? Like that's hard, right? Yeah. I mean, you're quite blasé about it, but like that's a full-time job playing on tour.
Yeah. I'm it'll be great when it's done, and I enjoy like working and have stuff that's going on outside of golf, because you do have a lot of downtime on the PGA Tour, but it is a lot and takes a lot of kind of mental capacity to be involved in all the other little things. And, again, all credit to kind of the team I've had around me, even before kind of the staff, the people like, John Shemp and David Margolis and Will Smith and Colin Sheehan, the group of people that have helped develop the club, deserve a lot of credit to kind of it getting to the point where it's at now.
Well, sort of last sort of question, I suppose, is more about, you mentioned Utah and maybe doing a sort of more of a public access model there. I sense it's really hard to build really good public access golf in America, because to design and build really good architecture does take money and investment. So, doing the tree farm, my limited understanding is that, you've got to raise money, you bring in some founding memberships, you then that gives you some funding, and you've got to build on that, which you don't have the luxury of doing necessarily with public golf. And I think, I suppose what I'm driving at is, can you sort of maybe bring to life how tough that is to actually build something that is non-member led, but delivering a really good product without just you ponying up all of your cash to do to try
Yeah.
and get it, because it's hard. Like, it's not your job just to gamble everything on this. You don't want to keep betting the house,
Yeah.
do you?
Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of people just kind of don't understand. And you're obviously never going to understand that until it's you kind of doing it, right? But you brought up a lot of good points, and a lot of the challenges with why don't you see a lot of just unbelievable public golf courses that aren't, like city or, county courses. It's, because it takes a lot of money to do it. I've always kind of hoped and dreamed that the tree farm would be a good enough kind of proof of concept in some regards, that it's like, hey, Zac Blair is capable of building a really cool place. Maybe he can do this on the public side in Utah, and maybe you can get some private money that believes in it enough to be involved. And hopefully that's kind of what happens in TBC's case. But yeah, it's not something that $1 or $2 million is going to go out and make
Yeah.
any real sort of difference. It takes a lot of money to do it the right way and build a really cool place. And that's, if you can find a piece of property that is basically free.
Yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah.
But no, we had a great time out there, and look, I mean, yeah, a big thank you for having us out and playing. It was a real treat. And yeah, that's just so much good golf in Aiken now, isn't there? It's insane. Like, I can't believe we came away from that trip and we didn't manage to play Palmetto or Aiken Golf Club, which, the whole area is now just turned into pretty much a mecca for golf.
And did you guys play is it called the mine shaft, or what's the little par three course called?
I didn't know
The
there
the
was one.
chalk mine, the chalk mine.
Chalk
It's
one.
yeah, it's the same guy that kind of redid Aiken Golf Club. It's like I don't fully understand what it is. It's like the first tee kind of has some stuff out there, and then one of the colleges also kind of uses it a little bit, but it's also
No way.
really, like, I mean, yeah, it's just kind of right just outside of downtown Aiken, 5-10 minutes away. um I think just a hair west. Really, really cool. I mean, look at some pictures of that place too. And next trip, definitely gotta hit
Yeah.
up Palmetto, the Chalk Mine, Aiken Golf Club. Yeah, you can have a pretty sweet little trip just Aiken alone right now, which is fun. And you mentioned Old Barnwell. It's a really cool spot that's doing more, and hopefully we kind of get on our short course and everything like that, and it'll be fun.
Yeah, it's a great town, and I think Southern hospitality is just great, isn't it? It's so good. So yeah, no, it's awesome. Zach, I'm going to be keeping my eyes peeled this weekend. I'd quite like to see a tie spinner if we are in contention at any point in time. I think that would just be the ballsiest move. Would you ever put it in?
Yeah,
Would you ever
well,
put it in play?
I hit one last year at the Wyndham in the tournament. Ridiculous. Like, it couldn't have hit it better. It was kind of, I was down in this low left of seven at Sedgefield, the par three, and the pin was tucked way left, and there's this huge slope, and I had fallen down into like the low collection area and hit one of them that kind of got right to the top of the hill, started going down, and like really hit the brakes, and trickled down to like a foot. It was a ridiculous shot, and I had been messing around practicing it all week. And when I was over there, I kind of told my caddy, like, "Hey, this might be the time to put this one in play." And we had a friend out there, and I was like, "Get the camera out! Like, this, we're gonna try it here." So it was pretty funny, but yeah, it definitely can come in play, and we'll see if it ever makes its way to a big spot.
And the American Express, that's dormant Bermuda as well, isn't it? So it's a bit of a home from home.
I think they go dormant in the roughs and overseed, the
Okay.
fairways and greens. So it's the big contrast from fairways to rough. But it's a cool event. The weather looks good, and hopefully we can go out, make some birds.
Zach, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Thank you guys.
Watch this.